So ladies and gentlemen, Mermaider and Hell22 here in the headquarters. Got another great interview for you guys tonight. We have Andrew and James from As Autumn Calls. They're going to answer some questions about the album. So first and foremost, we really want to thank you guys for taking some time out to answer some questions for us.
Thank you, and thank you for the great review. It's definitely the most in-depth one we've received to date, and we really enjoyed reading it.
So the easiest question first. Who created your logo, and what inspired the artwork for your discography to this point?
Our good friend and artist Wallace Gillard created our logo and the artwork for our albums. The inspiration has come from lyrical themes and atmosphere created by our music. The artwork is gloomy, sorrowful, and full of conflict between beauty and darkness.
You guys have taken the death doom genre to different places, some familiar and some not. What inspired the overall sound and style of the band?
We just try to create dark, melancholic music full of melody and emotion. For us, the use of acoustic guitars and clean vocals represents beauty and nature, while the heavier distorted guitars and death vocals represent the darker, harsher side of life. And I really don't think that the overall style and sound of our band, it comes from one particular part of our lives. We kind of take from both the good and the bad, and hopefully that comes through in the overall emotion of our music.
What stood out the most in listening to An Autumn Departure was the contrast of the softer acoustic instrumentation mixed with some really harsh growls. How did you come to that sort of combination?
Honestly, this is something that James and I have always wanted to do. It's kind of a Beauty and the Beast thing, which is a good reflection of life, since life can be both dark and beautiful at the same time. And I don't really think that we thought of the combination as something we could do differently or would set us apart. It was really just something that we thought fit our music well, and we actually really enjoyed doing.
Walk us through the creation of a track for As Autumn Calls. Do you focus on the heavy first or the melodic?
There really is no focus on one or the other. Both are important parts of our music. Sometimes there are certain feelings that come out more than others and fit in a certain place, or sometimes there's a certain mood we would like to portray. We don't really have any magic formula or structure we follow. The songs are created purely by feeling.
How did the original recording of An Autumn Departure differ from the newer version? Was it simply a matter of production, or are there key musical differences from one to the other?
We definitely weren't happy with the production of the original recording. It took us about probably 2 years to record the album, and at the time James and I were living 5 hours apart, so we could only really get together here and there on weekends, maybe 3-4 times a year if we were lucky. So you can imagine this left a lot of differences in the sound between the different tracks and a lot of inconsistencies in the quality. So the album really never saw the light of day, and we moved on to the Emotionless EP instead once I moved back home. The other major difference is the track list on the new recording is a little different. We swapped out a couple songs with some newer ones that we wrote as we felt they fit a little better.
So we, like you, are fans of Catatonia. What led to the decision to cover Catatonia's Murder for the album?
We decided to cover Murder since Catatonia is definitely one of the bands which first inspired us to get together and create our own music. So we wanted to pay homage to them, so to speak. Brave Murder Day is definitely one of our favorite albums, and Murder is just an absolutely fun song to play.
What can we expect from the new album, Cold, Black, and Everlasting?
This release will be a blend between our two previous releases, while at the same time it explores new territory and delves deeper into our musical influences. You can expect more intricate acoustic passages, haunting melodic passages, more emphasis on vocals, and more complex song arrangements. It's full of emotion and atmosphere. Other than that, you'll just have to wait and see.
During your formative days, what bands inspired you to become musicians? And what were you listening to that pushed you towards the world of metal?
We've both been playing for many years and have a passion for music, metal in particular. In our early years, we started off listening to bands like Pantera, Slayer, and old Metallica. Bands like Deicide, My Dying Bride, and other bands from that era introduced us to different types of metal. Our more recent influences are bands like Opeth, Catatonia, Agalloch, Swallow the Sun, Static Fear, Saturnus, and many others.
The Canadian metal invasion seems to be growing in numbers, with scores of new bands emerging in the U.S. record stores. What is it like to be an up-and-coming metal band in our neighbor to the north? Have you come across any other small Canadian bands that you're particularly fond of?
We love living up here in the north. There's definitely a great metal scene here in Canada that's constantly growing, but it's not necessarily full of doom metal. It's mostly death and black metal bands, as well as various types of hardcore. There's a few good bands coming out in our area, but a couple worth mentioning for sure are Finner's Kane, who is probably best described as an atmospheric black metal band, as well as Woven Ancestry, who is more traditional black metal.
We often wonder about the dream tour for some of our favorite bands. If you could assemble a tour without any concern for cost, who would you want to share the stage with?
We'd love to play with Loss from the US, Saturnus, Agalok, Opeth, Catatonia, maybe Force of Shadows, Evoken, November's Doom, maybe even Swallow the Sun. Any of those bands we'd love to share the stage with. There's just too many bands to list. I'm forgetting half of them off the top of my head right now.
Recently, Randy Blythe of Lamb of God went on a Twitter binge, answering questions about the music industry. One thing he mentioned several times was how hard it is for a new band to truly make it these days. How do you feel about that statement, and where do you see music fitting in for you as a career?
I think it's very hard for new bands to get noticed. There's so many bands out there nowadays. Because of computers and computer software, it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper to put together an album. Most of the genres and subgenres are flooded. Some good, and there's a lot that aren't so good. I think it's hard to stand out and get the attention of the right people, especially since they are constantly being bombarded by thousands of bands, all begging to be noticed. As far as somehow making music a career, I think it's a nice dream, but not one I see in our future. For us, making music is a labor of love and a release from the real world. It's not likely that it'll go any farther than that for us.
With the new album fast approaching, what do you have in store for the future of As Autumn Calls?
Well, we have many ideas for potential future albums or EPs, but really don't have a defined direction for the band, as we don't want to limit ourselves to just one idea. Musically, we plan to continue exploring different influences and directions, and we've already begun discussing the next release after Cold Black and Everlasting. We also recently welcomed another member to our band, Brendan, who will be our second guitarist. So playing a live show here and there in the near future is definitely a good possibility and something we're very excited about.
Hey guys, thank you again for your time and for making music for the masses to enjoy. We hope you guys see some real success in the coming months and years.
Thank you. It was our pleasure.